When Jim Rohn said that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day, he wasn't delivering a slogan. He was giving us a map to a way of living. He understood that our lives are shaped not by sudden strokes of luck or by dramatic breakthroughs, but by the consistent, quiet decisions we make when no one is watching. That's why the very first key to thinking and acting like successful people lies in the commitment to personal growth. If you want to change your circumstances, you must first change yourself. Because the truth is, your income seldom outpaces your personal development, and your opportunities rarely extend beyond the level of your preparation. Life expands for those who expand, and life contracts for those who stop growing. Personal growth is not an event, it is a lifestyle. It's not something you do once in a while when you feel like it. It's something you deliberately build into your routine until it becomes second nature. Jim Rohn himself was a man who had learned this the hard way. He started out in debt, working jobs that paid little, drifting without direction, until he met a mentor who challenged him to take responsibility for his own development. That challenge changed everything, and it began with one question: what are you doing to work on yourself? That question is as relevant today as it was then, because if you ask most people what they are working on, they'll tell you about their job, their business, their problems, or their plans, but rarely about the deliberate effort they are putting into growing as a person. And yet, everything you want in life is directly tied to the person you are becoming. Reading was one of Rohn's most powerful tools. He often said, miss a meal if you have to, but don't miss a book. Why? Because books compress decades of experience, lessons, and wisdom into hours of reading. When you read consistently, you expose your mind to new ideas, perspectives, and strategies that can shift the entire course of your thinking. Successful people are voracious learners. They don't just read casually. They study, they underline passages, they take notes, they apply what they've learned. The difference is not in how much they know, but in how much they absorb and act upon. If you want to think and act like successful people, you must make it a non-negotiable part of your routine to feed your mind. Even center minutes a day compounds over time, and in a year, you will have consumed the equivalent of hundreds of hours of wisdom that most people will never expose themselves to. But personal growth goes beyond reading. It also involves reflection. We live in a world full of noise and constant stimulation. And yet, some of the most successful people are those who carve out time to be quiet, to think, to ask themselves important questions. Rohn himself was an advocate of journaling, a practice that sharpens your awareness and allows you to capture insights that would otherwise slip away. When you journal, you don't just record events, you clarify your thoughts, you analyze your behavior, you create space to see patterns in your life. This act of reflection is what separates the person who drifts, not from day to day, from the person who lives with intentionality. Another dimension of growth is mentorship. Rohn often credited his mentor, Earl Shuaff, as the man who set him on the path of success. One idea, one conversation, one challenge from someone further ahead can completely transform your trajectory. That's why successful people seek out those who can stretch their vision and hold them accountable to higher standards. If you surround yourself with people who are content with mediocrity, your own drive will weaken. But if you deliberately place yourself in the orbit of those who are striving, those who are building, those who are growing, you will be pulled upward by their energy. Growth is not just about what you consume, but about who you allow to influence your thoughts and behaviors. Personal growth also demands that you confront your weaknesses honestly. It's easy to lean into what you're already good at and ignore the areas where you fall short, but growth happens in the discomfort zone. Rohn used to say, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." That line captures the essence of growth. You don't pray for fewer obstacles. You develop the strength to overcome them. That might mean improving your communication, strengthening your discipline, expanding your financial literacy, or learning to manage your emotions more effectively. Every weakness you address becomes a new strength that compounds into your overall capacity to succeed. Consistency is where growth truly takes root. You cannot binge grow in a weekend seminar and expect lasting change. Transformation comes from the daily disciplines, reading a little every day, journaling a little every day, reflecting a little every day, practicing new habits a little every day. These small acts don't feel powerful in the moment, but over weeks and months, they build into unstoppable momentum. Just as a seed must be watered daily to become a tree, your growth must be cultivated steadily if you want it to bear fruit. And here's the paradox. The more you grow, the more you realize how much further you can go. Growth creates hunger. Success creates curiosity. Once you begin the journey of personal development, you never want to stop because you see the possibilities that unfold when you keep expanding. That's why successful people are lifelong students. They never believe they've arrived. They never let arrogance convince them that they know enough. Instead, they remain humble learners, open to correction, open to discovery, open to evolution. Think about the opposite for a moment. Think about the person who stops growing, who stops reading, who stops reflecting, who stops seeking challenge. At first, nothing seems wrong. Days pass, as usual. But slowly, opportunities shrink. Their conversations become repetitive, their mindset rigid, their influence limited. They become trapped in the person they used to be, while the world moves forward without them. That's the cost of neglecting personal growth, and it is far greater than the cost of the discipline required to pursue it. Personal growth is also the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not blind arrogance. It is the natural result of preparation. When you've studied, when you've practiced, when you've stretched yourself, you walk into situations with a quiet assurance that you are capable of handling them. That's why successful people exude confidence. It is earned through the continual process of becoming competent. The more you invest in yourself, the less intimidated you are by challenges because you've built the tools to handle them. Every great achievement in life is preceded by unseen seasons of growth. The book that becomes a bestseller was once hours of study and practice. The business that changes industries was once months of brainstorming and failing forward. The speech that inspires thousands was once countless nights of reading, writing, and reflecting. Growth happens in private long before it is celebrated in public. That's why Jim Rohn insisted that the first step in thinking and acting like successful people is not chasing after success directly, but committing to daily personal growth, because who you become will naturally attract the life you desire. Jim Rohn often said that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. It sounds so simple, yet it explains why so many dreams never materialize and why only a few people rise above the ordinary. Discipline is the quiet force that turns intention into reality. It is not glamorous. It does not make headlines. And most of the time, no one is watching when it happens. But in the end, it is the difference maker. Every successful person you admire has one thing in common. They learn to master discipline, not occasionally, not when it was convenient, but every single day. Discipline is not about punishment. It is about alignment, aligning your actions with your vision and your habits with your values. Without it, you drift. With it, you gain power over your future. Think about the way most people set goals. They get inspired. They write down ambitions. They talk about what they want to achieve. And for a few days, they are energized. But then life gets busy. Distractions appear, comfort takes over, and slowly the dream fades into the background. That cycle happens again and again because goals are not enough. Goals provide direction, but they cannot create momentum. Discipline is what keeps you moving. When motivation fades, when energy is low, when the excitement of the new idea wears off. That is why Rohn insisted that success is hidden in your daily routine. What you do consistently will always outweigh what you do occasionally. Discipline begins with how you structure your day. If someone were to look at your calendar, would they see evidence of your vision? Or would they see evidence of procrastination, of wasted time, of drifting? Successful people are intentional with their time. They know that each day is a container of opportunities, and what you fill it with determines the shape of your life. That is why they create predictable structures, morning rituals that set their mindset, blocks of time for focused work, habits that are repeated until they become automatic. They don't leave their future to chance. They embed it into their schedule. The routine may look ordinary from the outside, but over years, it creates extraordinary results. Discipline also means doing the uncomfortable. Most of the breakers in life come from doing the things you least want to do. The workout when you don't feel like moving, the phone call when you fear rejection, the extra hour of practice when you're tired. These are the very moments when discipline builds character. Jim Rohn would often remind us that you cannot avoid the pain of discipline. If you try, you simply trade it for the pain of regret. And regret is always heavier because discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. Successful people choose the lighter burden early so that they never have to carry the unbearable one later. The truth is, everyone has discipline in some area of life. Even those who appear undisciplined are disciplined in their routines of avoidance, in their patterns of excuses, in their habits of distraction. The real question is not whether you have discipline, but whether you have it in the right direction. If you can discipline yourself to waste hours scrolling through trivial content, you can also discipline yourself to read books, to build skills, to nurture health. The energy is the same. It is simply being misapplied. All successful people understand this, so they take control of their focus. They redirect their habits toward actions that compound into results. Discipline is closely tied to consistency, and consistency is what compounds effort into mastery. Doing something once does not change you. Doing something repeatedly ingrains it into who you are. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become, and eventually the identity takes root. You no longer say, "I try to be disciplined." You begin to say, "I am disciplined." That shift is powerful because when discipline becomes part of your identity, it no longer requires constant negotiation. It becomes automatic, part of your character, and from there, your capacity multiplies. It's also important to understand that discipline protects your energy. Most people think discipline drains them, but the opposite is true. And discipline drains you because it creates chaos. It fills your mind with guilt. It leaves you with unfinished tasks and wasted potential. Discipline, on the other hand, creates clarity. When you have structure, you don't waste energy wondering what to do next. When you keep promises to yourself, you build self-respect, and self-respect fuels confidence. Confidence is energy. This is why people who live disciplined lives often look like they have more energy and freedom because they are not weighed down by disorder and regret. Another aspect of discipline is learning to control your appetites Rohn often emphasized that success requires mastering your emotions, your impulses, and your desires. Without discipline, you become a slave to your moods. You eat what feels good in the moment, instead of what sustains your health. You spend impulsively instead of saving and investing. You react to circumstances instead of responding with wisdom. Discipline creates space between the impulse and the action. It allows you to say, I will not do what feels good right now. I will do what creates good later. And that single ability to delay gratification is one of the strongest predictors of success in every field of life. Discipline is also contagious. When you practice it, you influence those around you. Your children see it. Your colleagues feel it. Your friends are challenged by it. People are inspired not by what you say you will do, but by what they watch you do consistently. A disciplined life creates silent authority. You don't have to persuade people with words. Your actions speak. That is why leaders who live disciplined lives are able to command respect without demanding it. Discipline establishes credibility, and credibility multiplies influence. And while discipline requires effort, it eventually creates freedom. At first, structure feels restrictive, like it limits your choices. But over time, you realize that discipline liberates you, because when you master yourself, you are no longer controlled by distractions, by weaknesses, by external pressures. You gain the freedom to focus, the freedom to pursue meaningful goals, the freedom to live with integrity. Indiscipline feels free at the beginning, but enslaves you in the end. Discipline feels restrictive at the beginning, but sets you free in the end. That is why the successful choose discipline daily. They know that it is the only true path to long-term freedom. When you think of success, don't imagine it as one grand victory, right? Imagine it as 1,000 small victories over laziness, procrastination, fear, and doubt. Each time you choose to stay aligned with your vision, instead of giving in to distraction, you win. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, you win. Each time you push through discomfort, you win. Those wins, they may seem invisible at first, but one day they appear as opportunities seized, as health preserved, as skills mastered, as wealth accumulated. Success is not hidden in the extraordinary. It is hidden in the ordinary, done with extraordinary discipline. Jim Rohn became famous for saying that you are the average dot of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It is a line that has been repeated countless times, but very few people stop to grasp the depth of its meaning. Human beings are social creatures. We are shaped by our environments, influenced by the people around us, and unconsciously pulled in the direction of our closest associations. The reason successful people think and act differently is not only because of their personal choices, but also because of the company they keep. Your standards rise or fall, depending on who surrounds you. Your mindset, your energy, your vocabulary, even your sense of what is possible are all heavily influenced by your associations. That is why Rohn insisted that if you want to change your life, you must change who you spend time with. Think for a moment about the way we pick up habits. Most of the time, it is not deliberate. You start to mirror the attitudes of the people you see daily. If they complain, you start to complain. If they gossip, you eventually join in. If they are complacent, you slowly become comfortable with mediocrity. On the other hand, if you surround yourself with people who dream big, who pursue excellence, who challenge themselves constantly, something inside you stirs. You feel a natural pull to rise to their level. The human spirit is influenced by proximity. Spend enough time in a negative environment and your vision shrinks. Spend enough time in a growth-focused environment and your vision expands. This is not motivational poetry. It is psychological reality. Successful people are very intentional about their associations. They know that every relationship is either fueling their progress or draining their potential. That is why they make choices that others consider harsh. They distance themselves from people who consistently complain, who dwell on problems without seeking solutions, who resist change, who bring drama instead of wisdom. This does not mean they lack compassion, but it does mean they protect their environment because they know the cost of constant negativity. Protecting your environment is not arrogance. It is responsibility. Your future is too valuable to be poisoned by small-minded influences, But Rohn never suggested abandoning everyone in your life. His wisdom was to cultivate a balance, spend the majority of your time with those who lift you higher, and still give space for those you can encourage, support, and mentor. The problem arises when you reverse the ratio, when most of your energy is consumed by those who are not moving forward. That is when you stagnate, because you cannot climb upward while being pulled downward. Associations matter because energy is contagious, and you must decide which kind of energy you are absorbing daily. The law of association goes beyond friends. It extends to the content you consume, the conversations you engage in, and the environments you choose. If you fill your mind with gossip, trivial distractions, and shallow entertainment, you cannot expect to develop depth of thought. If you fill your days with people who never talk about growth, vision, or purpose, you cannot expect to develop clarity about your own goals. Successful people curate their mental diet as carefully as their physical diet. They ask, is this conversation nourishing me or draining me? Is this person challenging me or holding me back? Is this environment cultivating growth or promoting stagnation? These questions are essential because the influences you accept today become the results you live with tomorrow. And association or Dawi, sometimes the most dangerous influence is not the person who openly criticizes you, but the person who encourages you to stay the same. The friend who says, don't work too hard, just relax. The colleague who tells you, why are you trying so much? No one else is doing it. These voices sound supportive, but they are quietly training you to lower your standards. Mediocrity rarely comes from open opposition. It comes from subtle permission. That is why successful people are alert. They discern between voices of encouragement and voices of limitation. On the other side, one powerful relationship can transform everything. Rohn often said that one mentor can change the trajectory of your life. A single conversation can spark an idea that alters your destiny. That is why he encouraged people to seek out those further along the path. Now, to listen, to learn, to ask questions, to observe how they think and live. Success leaves clues, and you find those clues by associating with people who are already living at the level you aspire to. The value of such associations is not only in the knowledge they provide, but in the belief they instill. When you see someone close to you achieve something extraordinary, it breaks your own limiting beliefs and shows you that it is possible. That proximity to possibility can ignite more change than years of trying on your own. But associations are not just about who they are about who you become in the process of being around them. If you spend time with disciplined people, their habits rub off on you. If you spend time with ambitious people, their vision awakens your own. If you spend time with grateful people, their perspective softens your outlook. In every interaction, something is being transferred. You are either giving energy or receiving energy, and wise people choose circles where the exchange makes them better. This is not selfishness, it is stewardship, because when you become stronger, wiser, more disciplined, you are able to give more to others in the long run. This principle also explains why many people struggle to sustain change. They attend a seminar, they read a book, they feel inspired, but they return to an environment where no one else is growing. Within weeks, the old influences overpower the new motivation. Without supportive associations, growth becomes fragile. That is why Rohn emphasized that real change requires more than inspiration. It requires new associations to sustain the new identity. You cannot plant a seed of growth in toxic soil and expect it to thrive. You must plant it in an environment that nurtures it, waters it, and protects it from weeds. Look carefully at your 5 closest associations. Who are they? What do they talk about? What habits do they live by? What do they expect from life? And most importantly, how do you feel after spending time with them? Drained or inspired? These are not small questions. They are the very questions that determine the direction of your future. If you want to know where your life is heading, look at your associations. They are a mirror reflecting the standards you have accepted. Change the mirror, and the reflection changes. Jim Rohn's wisdom on associations carries a subtle challenge. To raise your standards of company, you must raise your standards of self. You cannot expect to sit at a table of disciplined, visionary people if you bring no value of your own. That is why personal growth and discipline connect directly to the quality of your associations. As you grow, as you practice discipline, you naturally attract higher quality people into your life. Growth creates alignment. Discipline builds credibility. Together, they open the door to better associations, and those associations pull you even higher. Jim Rohn taught that success is not measured only by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. The idea may seem counterintuitive at first, especially in a world where achievement is often measured by personal gain, by how much you own, by the titles you collect, or the wealth you build. But Rohn insisted that true success has little meaning without contribution. Contribution is the act of reaching beyond yourself, of making a difference in the lives of others, of taking what you have gained through discipline, growth, and effort, and channeling it outward. It is the transformation of success into significance. Contribution gives life its deeper purpose. When you live only for yourself, every achievement eventually feels empty. You may celebrate in the short term, but without something greater than yourself to connect to, the victories ring hollow. That is why so many people reach financial success, but still feel restless. They climb the ladder only to find it leaning against the wrong wall. But when you contribute, when you use your talents, your resources, your time, or your wisdom to uplift others, you create meaning that cannot be taken away. Contribution adds richness to life because it transforms success into service. Contribution is not always about money. Many people mistake it for philanthropy or charity alone, but it is much broader. Contribution can be found in the way you listen to someone who feels unheard, in the way you encourage someone who feels forgotten, in the way you share knowledge with someone eager to learn. Contribution is about value. Rohn often said that you don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour. That principle applies beyond business. It applies to life. The value you bring to others becomes the measure of your influence. And the more value you give, the more value you inevitably attract. Contribution also shapes your character. When you begin to focus outward instead of inward, you grow in ways that cannot be measured on a chart. Contribution softens arrogance because it reminds you that the world is bigger than your personal story. It cultivates gratitude because when you give, you recognize the blessings you have. It nurtures humility because it forces you to see needs greater than your own. These qualities are not small. They are the very qualities that keep success sustainable. So, success without contribution often collapses into pride and self-centeredness. But success with contribution becomes legacy. Think about the people you admire most in history. They are remembered not simply for what they achieved personally, but for what they gave. Leaders who sacrificed for freedom, teachers who passed down wisdom, innovators who created solutions, mentors who guided others. Their names live on because they chose to contribute. That is the invisible law of life. What you give away lasts longer than what you keep. Money fades, possessions decay, achievements are forgotten, but contribution endures in the lives of others. Contribution also creates joy. There is a kind of fulfillment that only comes from giving. You can feel it when you see the spark in someone's eyes because of something you shared, when you witness someone stand taller because you believed in them, when you see someone achieve what they thought was impossible because of encouragement. You offered. That feeling cannot be replicated by personal gain. It is deeper, quieter, and far more enduring. Rohn believed that contribution was not only a moral duty, but also the secret to a joyful life. To live for yourself alone is to live in scarcity. To live for others is to live in abundance. The beauty of contribution is that it creates a cycle. The more you give, the more you grow, and the more you grow, the more you can give. Growth equips you to contribute. Discipline sustains your ability to contribute. Associations expand your capacity to contribute. Each of the earlier principles leads naturally into this one. Personal growth without contribution becomes self-indulgence. Discipline without contribution becomes obsession. Associations without contribution become elitism. But when you add contribution, everything aligns. Growth has a purpose. Discipline has a mission. Associations have meaning. Contribution is also the antidote to selfish ambition. Ambition in itself is not wrong. Rohn encouraged ambition, but he clarified that ambition must be balanced with contribution. When ambition is only about accumulation, it breeds emptiness and isolation. But when ambition is paired with contribution, it creates impact. The most successful people are often those who turned their personal drive into collective benefit. They wanted more, not just for themselves, but so they could do more for others. That is the kind of ambition that leaves a lasting mark. Contribution requires awareness. You cannot contribute meaningfully if you are disconnected from the needs around you. That is why successful people are observant. They pay attention to where they can add value. They ask, what problem can I help solve? What encouragement can I give? What resource can I provide? What lesson can I share? And they act on it. Contribution is not about waiting for a grand stage. It is about daily acts of service. The smile you offer, the patience you show, the help you extend. These are the seeds of contribution that may look small in the moment, but can grow into forests over time. Rohn often emphasized that contribution multiplies. What you give has a ripple effect far beyond what you can see. Share wisdom with one person, and they may pass it on to 10 others. Encourage someone today, and they may carry that encouragement for years. Teach someone a skill, and they may build a future for their entire family. Contribution is exponential. It does not stop with you. It moves through you and spreads outward in ways you cannot predict. That is why successful people do not hoard value. They distribute it. They understand that contribution creates an invisible network of influence that grows stronger over time. Contribution also creates resilience. When life is difficult, when challenges come, when personal struggles feel overwhelming, contribution gives you strength to endure. Because when you are connected to something bigger than yourself, you find reasons to keep going. Many people collapse under pressure because they live only for themselves. But those who live for others, those who contribute, find a deeper reservoir of motivation. They endure not only for their own sake, but for the sake of those who depend on them, those who are inspired by them, those who are lifted by them. Contribution anchors you to a purpose that is greater than your pain. Perhaps the most profound part of Rohn's teaching on contribution is that it transforms success into significance. Success is about you, but significance is about others. Success can bring comfort, but significance brings meaning. Success may fade with time, but significance endures. Long after you are gone, contribution is the bridge that carries you from one to the other. And every person, regardless of wealth, status, or position, has the ability to contribute. You may not control how much you accumulate, but you always control how much you give.